Hey, what's going on? You're here with Emil, and what I'm about to go over is the authors of the mandate of 2025. This is very important because they may not share all of the opinions with each other, but they are sharing the same mission. And even if they say, well, I didn't want that to happen, their hands got blood on it. So with that being said, I'm going to transition to the actual booklet, and then it's going to be read out loud. Why it's being read out loud, I will be making it a point to make notes and figure out on my own what's going on. All right.
Authors Darren Baxt is Deputy Director, Center for Energy and Environment, at Authors Darren Baxt is Deputy Director, Center for Energy and Environment, and Senior Fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, CEI. Authors Darren Baxt is Deputy Director, Center for Energy and Environment, and Senior Fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, CEI. Before joining CEI, Darren was a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, where he played a leading role in the launch of the organization's new Energy and Environmental Center. For a decade, he led Heritage's food and agricultural policy work, and he edited and co-authored Heritage's book Farms and Free Enterprise. He has testified numerous times before Congress, has appeared frequently on media outlets, and has played leadership roles in such organizations such as the Federalist Society, American Agricultural Law Association, and Food and Drug Law Institute, serving on the Food and Drug Law Journal's editorial advisory board. Jonathan Berry is managing partner at Boyden Gray and Associates PLLC. He served as acting assistant secretary for policy at the U.S. Department of Labor, overseeing all aspects of rulemaking and policy development. At the U.S. Department of Justice, he assisted with the development of regulatory policy and with the nominations of Justice Neil Gorsuch and dozens of other judges. He previously served as chief counsel for the Trump transition and earlier clerk for Associate Justice Samuel Alito and Judge Jerry Smith of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. He is a graduate of Yale College and Columbia University School of Law. Lindsay M. Burke is director of the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Burke served on Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin's Transition Steering Committee and Landing Team for Education. She serves on the Board of Visitors for George Mason University, the Board of the Educational Freedom Institute, and the Advisory Board of the Independent Women's Forum's Education Freedom Center. Dr. Burke's research has been published in such journals as Social Science Quarterly, Educational Research and Evaluation, and Research in Educational Administration and Leadership. She holds a BA from Hollins University, and MA from the University of Virginia, and a PhD from George Mason University. David R. Burton is Senior Fellow in Economic Policy in the Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. He focuses on securities regulation, tax policy, business law, entrepreneurship, administrative law, financial privacy, the U.S. Department of Commerce, corporate welfare, 16 Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise International Investment, International Information Sharing, the U.S. Economic Relationship with China, and Climate-Related Financial Risk. Previously, Burton was General Counsel at the National Small Business Association, a partner in the Argus Group, Vice President, Finance, and General Counsel for New England Machinery, and manager of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Tax Policy Center. He holds a JD from the University of Maryland School of Law and a BA in Economics from the University of Chicago. Adam Kanjab is a professor of law at Michigan State University. His scholarly research focuses on telecommunication, antitrust, and Internet issues. He served as Acting Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Deputy Associate Attorney General at the Justice Department during the Trump administration. He received his BA magna cum laude from Yale University and his JD magna cum laude from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Dustin J. Carmack is Research Fellow for Cybersecurity, Intelligence, and Emerging Technologies in the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation. Previously, he served in the intelligence community as Chief of Staff to the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. In Congress, he served as Chief of Staff to Congressman John Ratcliffe, TX04, and Congressman Ron DeSantis, FL06. Mr. Carmack studied at Truman State University in Missouri and Tel Aviv University in Israel. Brendan Carr has nearly 20 years of private sector and public sector experience in communications and tech policy. He currently serves as the senior Republican on the Federal Communications Commission. Prior to this role, Carr served as the Federal Communication Commission's General Counsel. Earlier, he worked as an attorney at Wiley Rain LLP. Previously, he clerked on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. After graduating from Georgetown University, he earned his J.D. magna cum laude from the Catholic University of America's Columbus School of Law, where he served as an editor of the Catholic University Law Review. Benjamin S. Carson, Sr., M.D., is founder and chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute and previously served as the 17th Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Born in Detroit to a single mother with a third-grade education, Dr. Carson was raised to love reading and education. He attended Yale and earned his MD from the University of Michigan Medical School. For nearly 30 years, Dr. Carson served as Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery at the Johns Hopkins Children's Center, where he performed the first separation of twins conjoined at the back of the head. 17 authors. Ken Cuccinelli served as Acting Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services in 2019 and then, from November 2019 through the end of the Trump administration, as Acting Deputy Secretary for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. During his tenure as Acting Deputy Secretary, Ken also served as the Chief Regulatory Officer for the Department of Homeland Security. He also has served the Commonwealth of Virginia, first as a state senator and then as Virginia's 46th Attorney General. Rick Dearborn served as Deputy Chief of Staff for President Donald Trump and was responsible for the day-to-day operations of 5 separate departments of the Executive Office of the President. He also served as Executive Director of the 2016 President-elect Donald Trump Transition Team. Before that, Rick served in several roles, including as Chief of Staff, in the office of then U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions, RL, for nearly 2 decades. Between his 2 tours in Senator Sessions' office, he was appointed by President George W. Bush as Assistant Secretary of Energy for Congressional Affairs. Earlier in his career, Rick worked for the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the Senate Republican Conference, and the Senate Steering Committee. He graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a BA in Public Administration and a minor in Economics. Veronique Derugai is the George Gibbs Chair in Political Economy and Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University and a nationally syndicated columnist. Her primary research interests include the U.S. economy, the federal budget, taxation, tax competition, and cronyism. Derugai is the author of a weekly opinion column for the Creators Syndicate, writes regular columns for Reason magazine, and blogs about economics at National Review Online's The Corner. She received her MA in economics from the Paris Dauphine University and her PhD in economics from the Pantheon-Sorbonne University. Donald Devine is Senior Scholar at the Fund for American Studies in Washington, D.C. He was President Ronald Reagan's first-term Office of Personnel Management Director when the Washington Post labeled him Reagan's terrible swift sword of the civil service for cutting bureaucracy and reducing spending by billions of dollars. He was a professor at the University of Maryland and Bellevue University and is a columnist and author of 10 books, including his recent The Enduring Tension. Diana Furcht-Gottroth, an Oxford-educated economist, directs the Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment at the Heritage Foundation and is adjunct professor of economics at George Washington University. Diana served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology at the U.S. Department of Transportation, where she directed the department's $1.2 billion research budget, the 18 Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise Office of Positioning, Navigation and Timing and Spectrum Management, and the University Transportation Center program. Diana worked in senior roles in the White House under Presidents Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, where she was Chief of Staff of the Council of Economic Advisers. Thomas F. Gilman served as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Administration and Chief Financial Officer of the U.S. Department of Commerce in the Trump administration. Currently, he is a Director of ACLJ Action and Chairman of Torgat Metals. Tom is the former CEO of Chrysler Financial and has had a 40-plus year career as a senior executive and entrepreneur in the global automotive industry, including roles at Chrysler Corporation, Cerberus Capital Management, Asbury Automotive Group, TD Auto Finance, and Automotive Capital Services. He holds a BS in Finance from Villanova University. Mandy M. Guneskara of Oxford, Mississippi, is a principal at Section 7 Strategies, a senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, and visiting fellow in the Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment at the Heritage Foundation. During the Trump administration, Mandy served as the Chief of Staff at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as well as Principal Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Office of Air and Radiation. She previously served in numerous roles at the U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate, including as Majority Counsel for the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee under Chairman Jim Inhofe. She received her BA from Mississippi College and her JD from the University of Mississippi School of Law. Jean Hamilton is Vice President and General Counsel of America First Legal Foundation. Jean served as Counselor to the Attorney General at the U.S. Department of Justice, Senior Counselor to the Secretary of Homeland Security, General Counsel on the Senate Committee on the Judiciary, Assistant Chief Counsel at U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and as an attorney advisor in the Secretary's Honors Program for Attorneys at the Department of Homeland Security. Jean graduated from the Washington and Lee University School of Law magna cum laude and Order of the Coif and has a BA in International Affairs from the University of Georgia. Jennifer Hazelton has worked as a senior strategic consultant for the Department of Defense in industrial base policy and has held senior positions at USAID, the Export-Import Bank of the United States, and the State Department. She was also a communications director in the U.S. Congress and worked as an award-winning journalist for CNN and Fox News Channel. Hazelton holds an MA in Business Administration from Emory University and earned her BA from the University of Georgia. 19 authors. Karen Kerrigan is president and CEO of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council and has helped to strengthen U.S. entrepreneurship and global business growth for 28 years. She has provided counsel across the globe via training missions focused on entrepreneurial development, effective advocacy, policy formation, and implementation. Karen testifies regularly before Congress and has served on numerous federal advisory boards representing the interests of entrepreneurs and small businesses. Dennis Dean Kirk is Associate Director for Personnel Policy with the 2025 Presidential Transition Project at the Heritage Foundation. Born and raised in Kansas, he graduated with honors from Northern Arizona University and Washburn University Law School. Dennis has over 45 years of experience in private law and public federal government counsel services. He served in President George Bush's administration in the U.S. Army's Office of General Counsel and later as Associate General Counsel for Strategic Integration and Business Transformation, where he was recognized with the Exceptional Civilian and Meritorious Civilian Service Awards and other awards. During the Trump administration, Dennis served in senior positions at the Office of Personnel Management and was nominated by President Trump to be chairman of the Merit Systems Protection Board. Kent Lassman is president and CEO of the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Educated at the Catholic University of America and North Carolina State University, he has written on telecommunications, privacy, environmental, antitrust, and consumer protection regulation as well as trade policy and the design of regulatory systems. Kent's policy research and advocacy have taken him to 45 state capitals, more than a dozen countries, and deep into the heart of the federal regulatory state. Bernard L. McNamee is an energy and regulatory attorney with a major law firm and was formerly a member of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. He is also the Street Distinguished Visiting Professor of Law at the Appalachian School of Law. In addition to serving as a Federal Energy Regulatory Commissioner, McNamee has served in various senior policy and legal positions throughout his career, including at the U.S. Department of Energy, for U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, and for Virginia Governor George Allen. McNamee also served 4 attorneys general in 2 states, Virginia and Texas. Christopher Miller served in several positions during the Trump administration, including as acting U.S. Secretary of Defense, Director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Combating Terrorism, and Senior Director for Counterterrorism and Transnational Threats at the National Security Council. Before his civilian service in the XX Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise Department of Defense, Miller was an Army Green Beret in the 5th Special Forces Group with multiple combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, achieving the rank of colonel. Miller earned a BA from George Washington University and an MA from the Naval War College. He also graduated from the College of Naval Command and Staff and the Army War College. Stephen Moore is a conservative economist and author. He is currently a senior economist at Freedom Works, a distinguished fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and a Fox News analyst. From 2005 to 2014, Moore served as the senior economics writer for the Wall Street Journal editorial page and as a member of the journal's editorial board. He still contributes regularly to the journal's editorial page. He is a frequent lecturer to business investment and university audiences around the world on the U.S. economic and political outlook in Washington, D.C. Moore Inamdar is an attorney and senior fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council. She speaks fluent Farsi and is an expert on U.S. national security, human rights, global communications, the Middle East, and international law. Moore has served as senior advisor for critical issues at the U.S. State Department and was appointed by President Donald Trump to perform the duties of the Assistant Secretary of State for Consular Affairs. She also served as Vice President of Legal, Compliance, and Risk at the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Peter Navarro holds a Ph.D. in economics from Harvard and was one of only 3 senior White House officials to serve with Donald Trump from the 2016 campaign to the end of the president's first term. He was the West Wing's chief China hawk and trade czar and served as director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy and Defense Production Act Policy Coordinator. His books include The Coming China Wars, 2006, Death by China, 2011, Crouching Tiger, 2015, and his White House memoirs In Trump Time, 2021, and Taking Back Trump's America, 2022. His top-rated Taking Back Trump's America podcast appears on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. William Perry Pendley was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming. He earned a BA and an MA from George Washington University, was a U.S. Marine Corps captain, and earned his JD from the University of Wyoming College of Law. He was an attorney on Capitol Hill, a senior official for President Ronald Reagan, and leader of the Bureau of Land Management for President Donald Trump. For 30 years, he was president of Mountain States Legal Foundation, where he argued and won cases before the Supreme Court of the United States. He authored 5 books, including Sagebrush Rebel, Reagan's Battle with Environmental Extremists and Why It Matters Today. XXI authors Max Primorak is director of the Douglas and Sarah Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. He was acting chief operating officer and assistant to the administrator, Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, at the U.S. Agency for International Development. Previously, he was deputy director of Iraq's reconstruction program at the U.S. Department of State and a senior advisor in the Office of the Secretary. Max was educated at Franklin and Marshall College and the University of Chicago. Roger Severino is vice president of domestic policy at the Heritage Foundation. As Director of the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, from 2017 to 2021, he led a team of more than 250 staff enforcing civil rights, conscience, and health information privacy laws. Rogers subsequently founded the HHS Accountability Project at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. He holds a JD from Harvard Law School, and MA in Public Policy from Carnegie Mellon University, and a BA from the University of Southern California. Kyron K. Skinner is President and CEO of the Foundation for America and the World, Todd Professor of International Relations and Politics at Pepperdine University School of Public Policy, W. Glenn Campbell Research Fellow at the Hoover Institution, and a Visiting Fellow and Senior Advisor at the Heritage Foundation. Skinner served as Director of Policy Planning and Senior Advisor at the U.S. Department of State from 2018 to 2019 and was a member of the Defense Business Board at the U.S. Department of Defense in 2020. Skinner holds an MA and a PhD in Political Science from Harvard University and undergraduate degrees from Spelman College and Sacramento City College. Brooks D. Tucker served in the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs as Assistant Secretary for Congressional and Legislative Affairs from 2017 to 2021 and as Acting Chief of Staff from 2020 to 2021. He helped to craft the policy framework for President-elect Trump's transition team and served as the Senior Policy Advisor for National Security and Veterans Affairs to Senator Richard Burr from 2010 to 2015. A retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, Brooks served in Afghanistan, Iraq, North Africa, the Caucasus, and the Western Pacific. He is a graduate of the University of Maryland, Marine Corps Infantry Officer Course, and Marine Corps Command and Staff College and holds a certificate in legislative studies from Georgetown University. Hans A. von Spakovsky is Senior Legal Fellow and Manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative in the Edwin Meese Center 3 Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. He is a former member of President Donald Trump's Advisory Commission on Election Integrity. From 2006 to 2007, von XXII Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Spakovsky was a commissioner on the Federal Election Commission. He served as career counsel to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice from 2002 to 2005. Russ Vought is founder and president of the Center for Renewing America. A longtime conservative leader on Capitol Hill, Russ served in President Trump's cabinet as director of the Office of Management and Budget, where he oversaw the implementation of the presidential budget, key policies on deregulation, and a landmark effort to eliminate critical race theory and other radical ideologies in executive agencies. Prior to his White House service, Russ spent nearly 2 decades in the broader conservative movement on Capitol Hill, including as policy director for the House Republican Conference, executive director of the Republican Study Committee, and legislative assistant to former U.S. Senator Phil Gramm. Russ graduated with a BA from Wheaton College and received a JD from George Washington University Law School. William L. Walton is chairman of the Resolute Protector Foundation and host of the Bill Walton Show. In 2016 and 2017, Mr. Walton served in President-elect Donald Trump's transition team as agency action leader for all the federal economic agencies. He served as chairman of the board and CEO of Allied Capital Corporation, a $6 billion NYSE-traded private investment firm, from 1997 to 2010. He is the immediate past president of the Council for National Policy. His extensive board service includes the Heritage Foundation, American Conservative Union, American Enterprise Institute, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, National Venture Capital Association, and Financial Services Roundtable. Paul Winfrey is Distinguished Fellow in Economic Policy and Public Leadership at the Heritage Foundation. Before rejoining Heritage in 2018, Paul was Deputy Assistant to the President, Deputy Director of the Domestic Policy Council, and Director of Budget Policy at the White House. During the 2016 presidential transition, he led the team responsible for the Office of Management and Budget. He also has served as a senior staff member for the U.S. Senate Committee on the Budget. Paul served in both the Biden and Trump administrations for 3 terms as the chair of the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board that oversees the Fulbright program and educational exchanges sponsored by the Department of State. Editors: Paul Dans is director of the 2025 Presidential Transition Project at the Heritage Foundation, organizing policy and personnel recommendations and training for appointees in the next presidential administration. Before joining Heritage, he served in the Trump administration as Chief of Staff at the U.S. Office of Personnel XXIII Authors Management, as OPM's White House liaison, and as a senior advisor at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Paul has extensive experience in high-stakes commercial litigation and worked for several large international law firms in New York City from 1997 to 2012 before founding his own law firm. He is a graduate of the University of Virginia School of Law and received his graduate and undergraduate degrees from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Stephen Groves is the Margaret Thatcher Fellow in the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Groves served in the Trump administration, first as Ambassador Nikki Haley's Chief of Staff at the U.S. Mission to the United Nations. He later joined the White House as Assistant Special Counsel, representing the White House in the Mueller investigation. Groves also served as White House Deputy Press Secretary. His prior positions include Senior Counsel for the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations and Associate at Boyce, Schiller and Flexner LLP. Groves holds an LLM from Georgetown University Law Center, a JD from Ohio Northern University's College of Law, and a BA from Florida State University.
Yeah, so we just concluded the authors and editors portion of 2025 Mandate for Leadership, aka Project 2025. The next chapter, we're going to be going over the contributors, the people who gave generously. So keep your eye out for that. For democracy.